When I got engaged to the love of my life, I thought the toughest part would be picking the venue or finalizing the guest list. I had no idea the greatest obstacle would come from the woman who lived across the street, our infamous HOA queen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of community rules, and, in her own delusional mind, the heartbeat of the entire neighborhood. Her name was Karen, though she always insisted on being addressed as Mrs. Whitmore to maintain respect. To be fair, I had dealt with her antics for years. She once threatened to fine me because my lawn gnome was facing the wrong direction. Another time, she slipped a note into my mailbox that read, "Your Christmas lights are an eyesore and a disgrace to the HOA." Never mind that half the neighborhood adored the lights, and kids begged their parents to drive past our house to see them. She lived for control. She lived for attention. And now, she had her sights set on my wedding. My fiancée, Emily, and I had dreamed of a quiet celebration. We wanted an intimate ceremony, something meaningful, surrounded only by family and close friends. We weren't looking for a grand social event, just a day filled with love, sincerity, and the kind of memories that aren't bought with extravagance. But in a neighborhood where HOA politics were thicker than bloodlines, nothing stayed private for long. Karen found out. I don't know how. Maybe one of the other nosy board members let it slip. Or maybe she overheard my mother mentioning the engagement during one of her afternoon gossip walks. However she learned about it, she showed up at my door 2 days later, hands on her hips, lips pursed so tightly they looked like a stapled envelope. "Well," she announced, not even bothering with the greeting, "I assume my invitation has been delayed in the mail." I stared at her bewildered. "Excuse me?" "To your wedding," she clarified, as though I were too stupid to understand. "You do realize, given my position in the community, it would be both rude and damaging not to include me." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but Karen never joked. She leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was confiding in me. "It would send the wrong message if I wasn't there. People might assume you're unneighborly. That wouldn't look good, would it?" I told her the truth. Our wedding was private. Only family and friends we loved were invited. Her face hardened instantly, as if I had personally stabbed her in the ego. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "A very big mistake." I shut the door before she could continue, but her words echoed in my mind longer than I cared to admit. I figured she'd eventually get over it, maybe sulk around for a while, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that followed. The first sign was small. A letter, typed and stamped with HOA insignia, appeared in my mailbox. "Failure to notify the HOA of large gatherings or events may result in fines." I snorted and tossed it aside. Our wedding wasn't happening in the neighborhood anyway. It was at a ranch miles away. But Karen wasn't after logistics. She was after humiliation. A week later, another letter arrived. This one was even more ridiculous. The HOA requests a formal guest list of your upcoming nuptials to ensure compliance with community standards. Emily and I laughed ourselves breathless reading it. "She actually thinks she's the gatekeeper of our marriage," Emily said, shaking her head. But Karen wasn't laughing. She escalated. The day of our rehearsal dinner, as relatives flew in and emotions were high, I received an official-looking document slid under my door. I unfolded it and froze. It was a lawsuit. Karen, acting as plaintiff, was suing me for emotional distress, reputational damage, and deliberate exclusion from a community event. She was suing me for not inviting her to my wedding. I nearly dropped the paper in shock. Emily thought it was a prank at first, but when we saw the court date listed, our amusement turned to sheer disbelief. Karen had actually filed it. She was dragging me into court over her bruised ego. Family gathered around as I explained. My father muttered, "I've seen some absurd things in my life, but this..." My mother was furious, ready to march over to Karen's house that very instant. Emily clutched my arm, whispering, "Don't give her the satisfaction. We'll fight this." And fight we did. I hired a lawyer, though honestly, even he couldn't stop chuckling when I explained the situation. "You're telling me she's suing you because you didn't invite her to your wedding," he said, raising an eyebrow. This will be the easiest win of my career. Trust me, the judge won't tolerate nonsense like this." Still, I worried. Karen had a way of bending rules, of weaponizing authority. What if the court somehow took her seriously? What if she managed to drag out the process long enough to overshadow our wedding? The court date arrived sooner than I expected. Emily and I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by curious onlookers, neighbors, acquaintances, and people clearly there for the spectacle. Karen strutted in like a queen entering her palace, clad in a sharp suit and clutching a stack of papers as if they were holy scriptures. Her smirk made my blood boil. When the judge entered, we all rose. He was an older man with glasses perched low on his nose, the kind of judge who'd probably seen every absurd case under the sun. Still, nothing could have prepared him for this circus. Karen was given the floor first. She launched into her performance with all the self-importance of a Shakespearean actress. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling with faux fragility, "I stand before you today devastated, humiliated, and ostracized by my very own neighbors. You see, this man," she pointed at me with exaggerated disdain, "deliberately and maliciously excluded me from his wedding, an event of great significance within our community. As president of the Homeowners Association, my absence will surely be interpreted as disapproval, which damages not only my reputation, but the harmony of the entire neighborhood." Gasps erupted from a few onlookers, not of sympathy, but of barely contained laughter. Karen pressed on, oblivious. "Furthermore, this exclusion has caused me emotional anguish, sleepless nights, loss of appetite, and severe anxiety. I have been subjected to ridicule, whispers, and pitying looks from my fellow residents. This is no mere oversight, Your Honor. This was targeted, vindictive, and cruel." The judge adjusted his glasses, expression unreadable. He scribbled something down, then looked at me. "Defense?"
Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Neighbors whispered, some even applauded quietly. I felt Emily squeeze my hand, her eyes shining with relief. Karen, meanwhile, turned scarlet. Her grand performance had crumbled into ashes, her reputation mocked in front of everyone she'd tried to impress. She stormed out, muttering curses under her breath, but the damage was done. The judge's laughter became the story of the week. By the time our wedding day arrived, Karen was the neighborhood punchline. But as satisfying as it was to watch her get laughed out of court, I didn't realize one thing yet. Karen wasn't finished with me. No, this was just the beginning of a much bigger war. Our wedding day went off beautifully. The sun dipped golden across the ranch fields, the music flowed, family danced, and Emily looked like the very center of the universe. Everyone was laughing, eating, and crying in the best way. It was everything we wanted, small, sacred, perfect. But even in the middle of vows, speeches, and joy, I caught myself scanning the horizon for trouble, because Karen, humiliated as she was, had become unpredictable. People like her don't just slink into the shadows and lick their wounds. They plot, they obsess, they look for ways to strike back, no matter how petty, no matter how absurd. The first month of marriage was blissful. Emily and I returned to our quiet routines, grateful to settle into normalcy. But the whispers started filtering in. "She's still angry," my neighbor Ron told me over the fence one morning. "Karen's been going door to door, ranting about how you embarrassed her in court. She's calling it a conspiracy. Says you and the judge had a personal vendetta." "She'll get over it," I replied, though even I didn't believe it. Karen didn't get over things. 2 weeks later, I received another HOA letter. This one claimed my mailbox post was half an inch too high. A week after that, I was cited for noise violations after Emily and I hosted a quiet Sunday brunch with her parents. Then came a warning about unauthorized landscaping. She was weaponizing the HOA like a personal army. And it wasn't just me. She turned the screws on anyone who dared be friendly with us. Ron suddenly got slapped with a citation about his trash cans being left out 3 minutes too long. Another neighbor got fined for having a garden flag that wasn't approved by HOA standards. She was lashing out, clawing for control after being humiliated in court. At first, I thought about ignoring it, just paying fines if necessary and avoiding the confrontation. But when Emily came home in tears one afternoon because Karen had cornered her in the driveway, berating her about marrying into the wrong family, I knew this had to end. It was time to fight back, not in anger, but with strategy. I started digging. Public records became my evening reading. I searched HOA filings, financial disclosures, minutes from meetings. I spoke quietly with other neighbors who had suffered under Karen's iron-fisted rule, but were too scared to stand up to her. Slowly, a picture emerged, one uglier than I had imagined. Karen had been misusing HOA funds. She approved inflated landscaping contracts with companies owned by her cousin. She billed the association for administrative expenses that included her personal spa treatments. She had even reimbursed herself for community meals that were nothing more than fancy dinners with her friends at upscale restaurants. I compiled everything: dates, receipts, names. Emily watched me build the case with wide eyes. "Are you planning to take her down?" "I'm going to finish what she started when she dragged us into court. She wanted to use the law against me. Now I'll let the law expose her."
When she finally asked if there were any community concerns, I rose to my feet. "I have one," I said calmly. "I'd like to discuss financial transparency." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not on the agenda." "It should be," I replied, "because what I've discovered is very disturbing." Murmurs rose from the crowd as I stepped forward, carrying a folder stuffed with documents. I laid them on the table in front of the board. "These are records of HOA funds being misused. By you, Karen. Landscaping contracts awarded to family members, reimbursements for spa days, dinners billed to the HOA that had nothing to do with community business." Gasps filled the room. Karen's face went pale, then flushed red. "This is slander," she snapped. "These are lies, fabricated by a bitter man who—" "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out one last sheet, "these are receipts I requested directly from the vendors, with your signature authorizing payment." The room exploded. Neighbors who had been quietly resentful for years suddenly found their voices. People shouted, demanded explanations, demanded resignations. Karen tried to shout over them, but the tide had turned. Her power was cracking right there in front of her. And then the final blow. "I've also submitted all of this to the county auditor's office, and they've opened an investigation." Dead silence. Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. The board members looked shaken, some even furious at her. She stormed out without another word, but her empire had collapsed. The investigation moved fast. Within weeks, Karen was not only stripped of her HOA position, but also facing legal trouble for fraud and embezzlement. She was fined heavily, and whispers spread that she might even lose her home. And as fate would have it, the same courthouse where she had once dragged me over a wedding invitation became the place of her own public downfall. The judge, yes, the very same one, presided over her hearing. When he read out her charges, he glanced over the courtroom and smirked. "Seems this isn't the first time I've seen frivolous behavior from you, Mrs. Whitmore, except this time it's not frivolous, it's criminal." Neighbors who remembered her lawsuit against me chuckled quietly. Karen sat there trembling, the very picture of humiliation. Emily squeezed my hand, her voice soft. "You didn't just beat her, you ended her." It was true. For years, Karen had terrorized the neighborhood, ruling through fear and manipulation. But by exposing her, I'd turned her own tactics against her. She tried to make my wedding about her. She ended up losing
everything instead. In the months that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Without Karen, the HOA became cooperative, fair, and shockingly peaceful. People decorated their yards freely. Kids played in the streets without her writing angry letters. And for the first time, the community felt like, well, a community. As for me and Emily, we finally got the quiet, happy life we wanted. Every now and then, we'd see Karen's house dark and empty, foreclosure notices piling in the window, a silent reminder of what happens when arrogance turns into obsession. And I'll admit, sometimes, late at night, I'd remember the way the judge laughed at her lawsuit. That booming, incredulous laugh that had stripped her of her dignity in one instant. It became the perfect ending to her story. A woman who tried to sue me for not inviting me to my wedding wound up laughed out of court, exposed for fraud, and erased from the very community she thought she ruled. Justice, it turned out, didn't just laugh at Karen, it buried her.